the premiere episode of What's Under the Bed Season 2. We have lots of great interviews and surprises planned for you this season. This is just the start. So make sure you subscribe, share, like, comment, and subscribe again. Now, enjoy the interview. Before we start, we should give a happy birthday shout out to your friend and colleague, Tammy Lane, since we are recording this on her birthday. Today I'm speaking with a legend in the field of special makeup effects, Howard Berger. He's the B in KNB Effects group, and he co-founded with GREG NICOTERO in 1988. Over the past 30 years, KNB has become one of the most prolific special makeup effects studios in Hollywood. To all the horror fans out there, to say Howard Berger has been a part of nearly every movie you love from the past 30 years is not an understatement. He has hundreds of feature film and television credits. He has worked with all the biggest masters of horror, so many it will make you weep. He's been a part of projects for George Romero, Sam Raimi, Wes Craven, Tobe Hooper, Joe Dante, John Carpenter, Frank Darabont, John Landis, Stuart Gordon, Dario Argento, Rob Schmidt, Mick Garris, M. Night Shaymalan, Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Kevin Smith, and Eli Roth. He's also worked with Spielberg, Scorsese, David Lynch, Paul Thomas Anderson, Michael Mann, Michael Bay, David O. Russell, Cameron Crowe, Rob Reiner, Jon Favreau, Seth MacFarlane, Seth Rogen, and the list goes on. He was nominated for the Academy Award in 2013 for his work on Hitchcock. He won the Academy Award in 2006 for the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He was nominated for a Primetime Emmy in 2014 for his work on Breaking Bad. He also won an Emmy in 2011 for The Walking Dead. He has been nominated and won a BAFTA Saturn Award and 3 Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. Howard, is a real pleasure speaking with you.
Wow, that was great. I'm going to have you introduce me on every single podcast I do. Anything I do, I'm like, okay, go ahead, hit it. So that was very good. That was, yeah, I think that was probably the best intro I've ever had. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So my very first question is, where do you keep your Chainsaw Awards?
Well, believe it or not, there's the original Chainsaw, the very first Chainsaw Awards they ever had at Fangoria at the show. Was a little piece of wood, a block of wood. There are 2 blocks of wood with a little plastic chainsaw that was spray painted gold. And Greg and Bob Kurtzman and myself won it for Army of Darkness. And a guy named Bill Hunt, who is a guy that used to work with us, and he now lives in New Zealand and worked with Richard Taylor on Rings and King Kong and so forth, and he's a prolific artist over there. He designed and made it and all that. So that actually, we have a room that has a bunch of award stuff in it. So that's in the room with some awards, and then we have the other Chainsaw Awards along in that room. It's in the display room that's in the other side. So, but yeah, that's where our Chainsaw Awards are, and we're always excited when we see that we get nominated for something. It's great. It's not like why we do things. It's kind of gravy, and regarding the Fango Awards, it's kind of like, it's great because those are like people that love what we love. Obviously, I know you're a fanatical monster and horror fan. I can tell that right out of the gate, which is cool. And, it's nice when people that because I'm a fan, I'm still a fan. Greg is a huge fan, and we get excited by it all. So it's really kind of fun. I mean, I remember the first time KNB had an article in Fangoria, and we were like out of our minds. It's like, oh my goodness, look at this. We're in Fango, because we used to read it. My mom bought me it when I was like 14 years old, the first copy I ever had. And I just dreamed of being in Fangoria someday. Even if I was like working for somebody, I was like, oh, see that guy in the back? That's me. But, when KNB started to make a rise and Tony Tempone was putting us in the magazine, it was really something special. It still is. It's cool.
You were born and raised in Burbank, California, and your father was a sound engineer, mostly for television. I heard he would take you to work sometimes, and I believe it was on the animated series Super Friends, where he was working with Ernie Earl Anderson. Ernie Anderson worked as an announcer for ABC television in the 70s, but in the 60s, he portrayed Ghouliardi, the host of late-night horror films on WJW Channel 8 in Cleveland, Ohio. He was also the father of the director, Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah.
Did you and Paul Thomas Anderson know each other as children?
We did. Yeah, we definitely did. So my dad owned a post-production sound company called B&B Sound Studios, and they did movies, but they did a lot of TV. And my dad had the ABC account, and Ernie Anderson was the voice of ABC. It's like, next on the Love Boat, coming up next on Fantasy Island, that was all Ernie Anderson. And so I would go with my dad to work on the weekends. And once in a while, Ernie brought his son, Paul, and we would hang out, and we were kids. Literally like little kids, and I got to know Paul. But then we weren't like best friends or even whatever. We saw each other and we were friendly. We talked about stuff. But my dad worked with Ernie every single day, and I would see Paul once in a while. So out of the blue, one day I get a call from Paul Thomas Anderson, and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing this movie called Boogie Nights, and I'd love to have you work on it. You and I have never worked together." So I went and met Paul, and I'm like, I definitely want to work with Paul. So, and this is, he wasn't, he was just coming up. He was just becoming, this great filmmaker. And so, yeah, I worked on that and then did some stuff on Magnolia and then, a bunch of other stuff. And this is something that a lot of people actually do not know. Actually, nobody knows this. So I'm going to tell you. So did you see Licorice Pizza? Which is Paul.
No,
movie?
I haven't.
Okay. So if you see Licorice Pizza, which is Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film, he was nominated for Best Director and Best Screenwriter, and the film was nominated for Best Picture this year. It's a great movie. I think you'll like it. Paul called me during the pandemic and said, "Hey, I wrote a part for you in the movie. Will you be in the movie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So he wrote a part for me. I worked one day. I had like 3 scenes with Cooper, who was the lead actor, and Cooper Hoffman. And I thought it was fun. I had a great time, and having Paul direct me and all that stuff. Unfortunately, Paul called one day and he's like, "I got some bad news." And I said, "What?" "I got cut out." He's like, "Dude, the movie's like 3.5 hours. I have to cut it to 2. And I chopped out a whole bunch of things. And unfortunately, your whole storyline got cut out." So I said, "Well, I understand. I know how films are made." He said, "But know what the good thing is? I'm going to make more movies. And the really good thing is you're going to be in them." And I said, "That sounds great." So it was really fun. It gave me a different perspective, although I've been in movies before, but usually as a monster or a zombie or, not as myself. But it was a great opportunity. And I was really thankful to Paul. And since I got cut out of the movie, he gave me a special thank you at the end. And he took me to go see the movie before it came out. And it was just he and I in the movie theater as a private screening. And I sat there with Paul and we watched the movie, and I laughed and loved it. And I said, I get it. I wish I was in the movie because I think the movie's so outstanding. It'd be great to be in it, and people go see it and go, "Oh my God, there's Howard Berger." So I wrote Paul, and I'm like, "I hope you're going to do a director's cut and you're going to put me back in." But I didn't hear back. So I don't know if it's going to happen.
So what was it like growing up with a father in the film business?
It was cool because I love movies. My dad, introduced me to films early on. And I love movies and I love monsters, and he encouraged that, and my mom encouraged that. And because she was a fine artist, so she would, I remember she did a big drawing of the creature from the Black Lagoon, like a 1-to-1 scale on butcher paper, and she hung it up on my bedroom door. So when I went to bed, she closed the door there, I could look at the creature from the Black Lagoon. So they definitely were feeding my monster kid needs, for sure. Because my dad was such a film fanatic, I would ask him a million questions. We'd watch movies all the time. And yeah, it was great. But I thought it was normal, see? So I'd always ask people like, "Oh, what movie are you going to watch tonight?" Or what? And people are like, "What are you talking about?" But we watched movies nonstop. And I just thought that was normal. Or because my dad was in the industry and had a lot of friends that were in, actors and so forth, and voiceovers, they would come to the house. And I would just think that Gary Owens, who was a huge, voiceover, came to everybody's house, or Paul Frees, came to people's houses, or Phyllis Diller comes to your house all the time. I know these are all names you're like, I don't know who the hell any of these people are, but trust me, there's people listening to your podcast and they're like, "Oh, we know who those people are." And my dad used to make recordings of these voiceovers for us. I still have them all on reel to reel. And it'd be like Phyllis Diller saying, "Hey, Howard," because I have 3 sisters. There's Heidi, Heather, and Holly. So it'd be like, "Hey, this is Phyllis Diller. Just want to say hi to Howard, Heidi, Holly, and Heather. And, you know, I'm here with your dad, da 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 da." So he had all these tapings of all these voiceover celebrities, and it was so exciting. And I think I have one of Ernie Anderson, matter of fact. I should probably play it for Paul. Yeah, it was cool. And it was cool growing up here in Los Angeles. So I grew up in the Valley, the San Fernando Valley in Northridge, and it was great. It was a wonderful childhood, and I was obsessed with monsters. And I met a friend down the street, Mike Fisher, who loved monsters too. And, you know, it was all about monsters, you know, and waiting for Halloween to come. And so we could tear up our front lawns and bury body parts sticking out and put our cardboard fake tombstones and all that good stuff. So Halloween was like Christmas to me. You know, it's like my heart would palpitate and I could hardly wait. And, you know, it was always so sad when we had to take all the decorations down and throw away the pumpkins. It was like burying a relative, you know, when you're tossing the pumpkin in the trash.
Before the influence of movies, what scared you the most as a child? Were you afraid of the dark, a ghost in the attic, or a monster in the bed? What was it?
No, I didn't know fear until I saw movies. The movie that scared the hell out of me, it's a movie called Dr. Phibes Has Risen from the Grave, starring Vincent Price. And my dad showed it to me when I was very, very little. I'm going to say maybe I was 6. And I had nightmares every night. And there was a couple things in it that just freaked me out. And I would wake up screaming. And I remember my mom would run in to calm me down, and she would say, "You're never going to see a horror movie as long as you live. Never. You can't handle it. You're never going to see another horror movie." So that didn't stick, obviously. But yeah, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I mean, I get creeped out easily. Like, you know, even if I'm downstairs at my house, there's like 3 levels, and it's at night, and I'll have to go down and turn the lights off. And because I'm in the world of horror and my brain is really, you know, very active, I'll sometimes think like, oh, what happens if there's like the grunge girl down there or something? And I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. And I run up the stairs to where my wife is, you know. I'm like, she's like, "What were you running?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's a long story." So, but yeah, I still get kind of weirded out and creeped out. Ghosts give me the willies, you know. I always get like chills and stuff about that. And, you know, and I think as far as like monsters go in films, like zombies weird me out. There's something about zombies. I think maybe because they're human beings that are dead and walk the earth. You know, I think George Romero really like explains it well when I think it's Ken Foray goes, you know, "They're just like us. They're us. You know, that's why they come to this mall, because they remember." And I really, that plays strong with me. And I get, you know, I don't like dead things anyhow. I always have like obviously it's not like, "Oh, I love dead things. Let's play with a dead cat." I would always get freaked out and just did not want to go near anything dead. While my friends were poking a dead cat with a stick or something on the way to school, I would run the other way. It just grossed me out. So I think the undead is what really freaks me out and still continues. Like, I'm just like, somebody's in a zombie make, I'm like, I'm good.
I heard your first horror film was The Thing with Two Heads and had Rick Baker playing a gorilla with 2 heads.
Yeah.
Was it your father who got you interested in scary movies?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my dad got me totally hooked. Yeah, I saw this movie called The Thing with Two Heads, and it starred Rosie Greer and Shaymalan. And yeah, in the beginning of the movie, there's a 2-headed gorilla, and I'm like, wow, that is so cool. And that's, you know, when I started to learn about Rick Baker, I was like, wow, Rick's the guy that did that, and he did this, and he did all these amazing things, you know, that I grew up loving. So, but yes, yeah, that really stuck in my head. And I think then when I got introduced to like the Japanese monster movies like Godzilla and so forth, that's when I was like, I want to do this. I want to make monsters. And I tried to figure out, like, I keep asking my dad, like, how do they do this? And he bought me an issue of Famous Monsters of Filmland that Forey Ackerman used to edit. And it had all these great photos of people making monsters. And I'm like, who are these people? And my dad said, that's a guy named John Chambers. And he's a makeup artist, and he did Planet of the Apes, and he did all this other stuff. And I'm like, so you can get a job doing that, like making monsters and for movies and TV. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. There's a facet for every aspect of the crafts. And that's when I decided I got to do this. And that was probably about 8 years old. And there was a store in North Hollywood called Sig Friends Beauty Supply, and they had a lot of makeup effects stuff, but the word makeup effects didn't exist back then. But my grandfather took me there, and I bought some alginate to cast my face, and some plaster and some clay, and just started off that way, and doing stuff on the floor of my bedroom, and here we are today.
Did you have many restrictions as a kid? I know your mother said you would never watch it, but that obviously failed. So yeah. Did you?
No, I didn't. My parents were good. You know what? As long as I maintained good school grades, which I did, I was a very good student. There wasn't going to be a problem. And then as I got older, I met Stan Winston when I was 12 years old. And Stan Winston, his studio was down the street from my house. It was about 2 miles. And I could either take the bus or walk. And and Stan would let me come visit, but I had to show him my report card, my school report card. And if I got anything below a B, I wasn't allowed into the shop. So I made sure I maintained A's and B's. So when I could go visit Stan, he would let me in the shop. So I always had A's and B's. So my parents let me go and do tons of stuff. And back then it was different in the 70s, and it wasn't as scary as it is today for kids. And we were outside all the time and riding our bikes and building forts and making monsters and making movies too, because we all had Super 8 cameras, and we would make these stupid movies. Like I remember my friend Mike Fisher, his parents had like an RV, bus sort of thing, and that was our spaceship. We blacked out all the windows with black tinfoil, and we poked holes so it looked like there was a star field, and we shot a movie inside there that we were in a spaceship, and somehow everything always ended up on fire. So like, because we would buy sterno and then put it all over like dolls or whatever and light them on fire, because we were obsessed with fire and all that stuff. But yeah, it was great. So I just all I knew was movies, and my parents just encouraged that and encouraged art and reading and being trying to stay on top of things, and it was great. It was great. I really was a lucky kid, having parents inspire me and support me, because sometimes you don't have that, and that's unfortunate, but I lucked out.
Just making clear, you and your friends were little arsonists.
A little bit, yes. Yeah, my friend Mike Fisher was totally into arson, actually. I remember we shot something where he wrapped his arm up. This was totally nuts, and don't anybody do this. It's so dangerous. He had gasoline-soaked rags, and he wrapped it around his arm. He put like a leather glove on, and then we lit it on fire. That was in our movie, but the thing was we had to shoot it near his pool, so when it got too hot, he'd jump into the pool. But the shot was looking up, so you didn't see the pool, but he'd be like, "Oh, I'm on fire," in his arms, all these flames, and then he'd jump into the pool and extinguish the flames. And his parents weren't at home, obviously, or we would have all been in big trouble. But we did stupid stuff like that all the time, or we'd go and we were able to buy, back then you could buy firecrackers, big firecrackers, and we used to like build miniatures and then put the firecrackers in there, light them, and then they'd blow up, and we'd shoot them on a Super 8 and cut those into our movies and all that crazy stuff, So it was always sci-fi related or horror related. I made a ton of movies with my sisters where somehow all of them end up getting killed by like some weird phantom and we had like in our backyard, like this little walkway that was kind of hidden. And that was always where my sister Heidi played like the gypsy girl, and always ended up getting killed back there by some sort of monster in all my movies. So.
Good God.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff, right?
Yeah. So we had Joe Dante on the show before, and he described himself as one of the monster kids for the audience. Monster kids were children who were fans of the monster boom of the 60s and 70s. I've heard you describe yourself that way as well. Were you a monster kid?
Oh God, yes. Yeah, I'm still a monster kid. Look, I'm wearing a Boss t-shirt today. So
oh, you are.
Yeah, it's always, I'm always representing. So but yeah, no, yeah, absolutely a monster kid. I mean, I was raised, I breathed and dreamed of monsters. I mean, when I was really young, I walked into a fire hydrant somehow, not paying attention, and I knocked all these teeth out, and all I had were my canines in front. And my mom made me a Dracula cape that I wore, And I'd run around as Dracula, and all the people in the neighborhood were always like, "Hey Dracula, hey Dracula," and I'd run up and down. I remember it would be all my teeth missing except my canines, and then a black Dracula cape and cowboy boots and shorts, running up and down, up and down. And I was convinced I was like King Kong, or I was the creature in the Black Lagoon. I mean, I was looking through some old photos of when I was a kid, and it's all monster related. Like we had like a little pool in the back, like an adobe, or doughboy pool or whatever. And every photo, I'm the creature from the Black Lagoon, like attacking my sister somehow, with the arms up like this, and just like your model kit there. And yeah, I was obsessed with creature. I was obsessed with King Kong and Godzilla, Dracula, the Wolfman. I was never a Mummy fan because I just felt like you could outrun the Mummy. So he's kind of like, oh no, here comes the Mummy. Well, let's just stand here. He'll catch up to us, So he wasn't really a threat. But Frankenstein's monster, I always thought was amazing. So, but yeah, obsessed with monsters. I'm still obsessed with monsters. That never ever goes away. I mean, look what's behind me. This is like in my office, and there's tons of monster stuff up there. So, and there's monsters on my wall, and there's monsters over there, and there's monsters over there. So in my office, there's tons and tons of monsters. But yeah, Greg and I love monsters. We're obsessed with monsters, and yeah, it's great. I'm definitely a monster guy. I totally agree with Joe Dante, and everybody else, who made these movies and grew up loving monsters, and it inspired them and it influenced them in the movies that they made.
So many monster kids were reading Famous Monsters of Filmland, the sitcom, and were watching the sitcoms The Addams Family and The Munsters, right. Both launched in September 1964. Scooby-Doo began chasing monsters in 1969. Toho released a new Godzilla movie every year during the 1960s and into the 70s. Universal Monsters were in syndication and playing on local television stations around the country. I understand Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of your favorite creatures.
Yeah.
One of the companies who cashed in on the monster craze was Aurora Plastics Company with their line of plastic monster models that included Frankenstein, Dracula, King Kong, and Godzilla. You actually pointed this out, but this creature right here the creature is our unofficial mascot for the show. He is a vintage 1963 Aurora model.
Nice. Yeah, that's a treasure.
Awesome. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Did you build any of the Aurora models when you were a kid?
Absolutely. I built them 100 times over. Yeah, no, the very first one I ever got, I was in nursery school and a place called Magic Years, and which is still around in the valley and on Reseda. And there was a kid that went there. I want to say his name was Michael White. And I got invited to a play date at his house. And I went in, and he had all the Aurora monster models up on his shelf. I'd never seen them before. And my eyes were like, I was out of my mind looking at him like, oh my goodness, what are those? And he's like, oh, they're these model kits, da-da-da. So my mom picked me up, and I went home, and I said, we have to go to Sears. We have to go, I have to have these models. I can't live without them. And they were like probably $2.49, and this is in the 60s. So, and my folks weren't rich or anything, but they're like, okay, well, we can go and see. So we went, and the only one they had was King Kong, and they had stacks of them, or at least it looked like stacks to a little kid. And I begged my parents, so they bought one, and they bought the Kong. We brought it home, and my dad helped me build it, and I was so excited. And I held it all night long, and then just sat, on my nightstand, and I looked at it, and then I started to get more and more. And my grandfather, who was really, really encouraging, always would show up with an Aurora model kit for me, and I would build it, and I'd paint it with the tester's paint. It was a whole, take a whole day to do because it was so exciting. And for me, the clincher on some of them was putting the last thing, which is the red paint, the blood, even though there didn't have to be blood, but blood all over the creature's mouth and blood all over his claws. And then, if it was the Phantom of the Opera one, there's blood on the guy that's in the, on the bottom of the base, like kind of the forgotten prisoner. So that was always the thrill. Like, I'm going to put red paint all over this. It's going to be so bloody, everybody had blood on them, but I had those model kits like crazy. And I have like box ones over there that I bought, like revisions or whatever. But yeah, they bring back so many great memories, you know, and what it was like to hold them. And to me, when I was a kid, they were gigantic, you know, but now, as you can see, they're not that big, but they're still super duper cool. And, you know, the artist that did the box cover art was James Bama, who passed away last month. But Bama did all the Aurora covers. He's a very prolific artist, American artist, and did a lot of Western art, Doc Savage, book covers, and then monster models. And I had the opportunity to meet him about 29 years ago. I actually went to Wyoming to his gallery to meet him, me and my friend Mike Tursick. And we just said, will you ever put a book out of your Aurora monster model stuff? And he's like, oh, nobody cares about that. And I'm like, are you kidding? We would kill. And then a couple of years later, he finally put a book out of all his like fantasy art and monster stuff. And so, yeah, James Bama, B-A-M-A. And he was super influential as well. Like, you know, artists like Basil Gogo and Boris Vallejo, and of course, the great Frank Frazetta. So, you know, it was all kind of, that was it. We all tried to emulate all those guys as far as our artwork goes.
I actually didn't know much about how the model kits work, and you mentioned the blood thing. Apparently, the person who originally had this liked the blood because there's blood all over this guy.
Yeah, we love blood. I mean, that's what it's about. It's like, I can hardly wait to put all the blood all over the monster. So, yes.
So you mentioned Planet of the Apes earlier. Was it Planet of the Apes that inspired you to make monsters?
Well, I think Planet of the Apes made me realize, you know, makeups, you know, not, you know, that you could create these makeups on actors and they could become different characters. Because really, Planet of the Apes isn't a monster movie. It's a really amazing sci-fi film based on a book. And the script was written by, you know, Rod Serling from Twilight Zone. And it just was the first time I think I had seen such a massive transformation, you know, and I became obsessed with Planet of the Apes and Roddy McDowall, who played Cornelius, and just fascinated by it. And how, you know, as a kid, I did doodle, you know, in school I should be working, but I'm doodling like my idea of how this makeup broke down. Like, is it a chin and a nose and a forehead? And I wasn't very off, actually. And that was like the second thing I sculpted on my life cast was the Planet of the Apes makeup. I think we all tried our hands at Planet of the Apes makeups when we were kids. And but yeah, I was very, very obsessed with that. And I always dreamed of meeting Roddy McDowall. I remember there's an episode of the Carol Burnett Show, which was a long time ago. This was in the 70s. And Roddy McDowall showed up as Cornelius, and he dances with Carol Burnett. And I was so excited about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that. Cornelius is on the show. I just always dreamed of meeting Roddy. And my dad had gotten me a bunch of photos from 20th Century Fox publicity. He was friends with somebody there. So I still have it. It's a book filled with all the stills from all the movies. Anyhow, I did a movie in Oregon a long time ago, I think in 1988 or something, or 1989. And Roddy McDowall was in it. And my dream had come true. And I took my book with me. And I asked Roddy, first I said, I'm a huge fan and I have 100 questions, but I don't want to bother you. And he said, please ask your 100 questions. I said, I've been waiting since I was a little kid to ask you these questions. And I asked him every question I ever had about Planet of the Apes, and he answered every single question. And he signed all the photos in the book. And I got to do a makeup on him too, which was like insane. And it was so thrilling. And then I ran into Roddy twice after that, years apart, and he remembered me and he came over, was like, Howard, how are you? And I'm like, the little kid in me was like exploding, because I'm like, that's Roddy McDowall saying hello to me. You know, I'm a grown-up now, I'm a man and whatever and professional, but I'm still like out of my mind that Roddy McDowall walked over to me, you know, and said hello and wanted to see how I was doing, and things like that. It really shapes you as a person, and you realize, you know, that there's such kind people in the industry, and that they're always willing to stop and talk and give time. And it was a great lesson, you know, and I was lucky with that. I met a lot of people and makeup artists and celebrities and so forth who have always been really, really wonderful, you know, and I think that's what has helped form my mentality and the way I am. Plus my dad, you know, was really great in teaching me those sort of things, and you know, basically it's real easy, treat others the way you wish to be treated. And that's how I try to live my life and deal with people that I meet, you know, knowing them or not knowing them. And You know, it's everybody has a dream and everybody has a wish and a hope, and you want to just encourage that no matter what.
You mentioned how you first met Stan Winston, but when did you learn about Stan Winston?
That's a good question. I first learned about Stan Winston when it's the Star Wars Christmas special came out, which of course is probably something Stan probably didn't want anybody to remember. But yeah, I saw that and I was like, wow, look at that. And I saw the credits, Stan Winston. And I'm like, So I was looking in the yellow pages, which before we had Google and all that stuff, we actually had to open up a book and find people's names. And I saw Stan Winston Studios, and I called and I realized it was up the street from me. And somebody answered. I said, hi, my name's Howard Berger. I really want to be a makeup artist when I grow up. And I was wondering, can I come and visit? And the voice on the other end said, yeah, sure. That sounds great. And come over this day, Wednesday at, after school and da-da-da-da. So I did, and I packed up a box of stuff and had some sculptures and some other just real crappy stuff. And a book that I glued, like a sketchbook, I glued in all these photos I had of stuff I did. And I went and knocked on the door, and I took the bus and knocked on the door. And then Stan opened the door, and I was like, oh my goodness. And he invited me in, and I got to spend the day at Stan's. And that was when I was 12. And because it was right before, I was 12 or 13 years old. So it was just as Star Wars started to explode, and I was obsessed with Star Wars, and that Stan did the Star Wars Christmas special, which when you're 12 years old, you're like, it was great, but it's not so great. But yeah, and then Stan stayed, was always open to me visiting. And then he's always said, when you graduate high school, give me a call and then you can start work here. And I graduated high school and I gave him a call and I started work at Stan Winston's. And the first movies I did there were Aliens and Invaders from Mars. And then I left to go work on some other stuff. Then I came back, and the last two movies I worked on, or the last three movies, were Monster Squad, Predator, and Pumpkinhead. And Pumpkinhead was the last movie I worked on at Stan Winston's. And then, and Stan was always a great, great guy. And I became great friends with his son, Matt Winston, who I'm still great friends with. And Stan meant a lot to me. I learned a lot about business from Stan, aside from being a great makeup artist, the way he treated his team, the people that worked for him, his employees. He was always great. He was always there. He was the first one in, last one out. And it was a great, great experience. I miss him terribly. He passed away in 2008. We left a giant hole in a lot of people's lives and in the industry, because he really was a major leader in a lot of different things. So, massive influence to me.
So I read that there were two books that were very important to you at this time. One was The Art of Theatrical Makeup for Stage and Screen by Michael Westmore, and Making a Monster by Al Taylor. Who introduced you to these books, and are they the basis of your early training?
Yes. So I feel like you broke into my house last night and you took all my stuff. So
yes, that's exactly what we did.
So when I went to Sig Friends Beauty Supply with my grandfather, there was a person that worked there. His name was Naimi. And Naimi said, oh, well, you want to buy this book. And that was the Mike Westmore book. And it's a very simplistic book, but it's a great way to learn how to do things. And the way Mike wrote it and the illustrations, it really tells you everything. It's fantastic. So my grandfather bought that book for me, and I followed everything to the T. And so I did everything in the book, learned a bunch of stuff. And then I was like, well, I think maybe I could try something a little different, kind of a variation. So then I did variations on things. And then, I started to develop my own way about how I do things. And, just because somebody says do it this way doesn't necessarily mean that's the best. I always tell people that work with me, there's 100 ways to make a hamburger, but at the end of the day, it's a hamburger. So you want to find, different ways to make hamburgers. So that was really a very important book to me, and I still have the original copy I bought. And then Making a Monster came out, and that blew my lid. And it was the first time I actually had ever seen a book that had interviews with makeup artists that some I knew, a lot I knew, and some I didn't know. And it was so thrilling, and reading it cover to cover. I mean, I'd read that book a million times, and it got to the point where I have 3 copies of that. So I have the original copy that I carried around with me all through my teenage years in my backpack, just in case I needed it. And then when I got older, I bought 2 more copies just to have, because that book is so dear to me. But I always thought, like, wow, it'd be really, really cool if someday they wrote a sequel, because it's like, it needs an update, and it's such a great book and all that. And that's kind of where my idea sprung for me writing my book, that I did with Marshall Julius. And yeah, it was just kind of like, I kind of want to do a Making the Monster Part 2 book, but different, again, making, hamburgers, 100 Ways to Make a Hamburgers. But yeah, that's where it all started. So those 2 books are extremely influential to me. Also, 2 other books that are great are Richard Corson's Stage Makeup, which is really, really was because it had great techniques and how to do out of the kit stuff, but it had a whole section on Dick Smith doing the Abraham Lincoln makeup and the Mark Twain makeup on Hal Holbrook. And that was, I mean, amazing to see how Dick did that, in these beautiful black and white photos. And then there was a book that Lee Began put out called like 3D makeup techniques. And it was all about prosthetics. And John Caglione, who's a really huge makeup guy, he's the model of it. And he always says, I didn't do any of those makeups. I have nothing to do with those makeups. I just wore them. So, but Lee Began used to work at NBC, and that's how John met him. And John just, ended up sitting for all the makeup applications for the book. But those 4 books are like the big books for me when I was growing up, and they still are. I still look through them, and I'm like, it brings me back to when I was a kid, till I was a teenager. I feel it in my heart, and it's just like, oh, I feel so young, even though I'm not. So.
I read you would experiment makeup techniques on your sisters. Is it true one of them lost an eyebrow during this?
That is all true. My eldest sister, Heidi, still has a section, I think, missing. And I used to use my sisters as my models. So they would come in my room, and I'd make them up and all that. And I didn't know what I was doing. So like, I'd put liquid latex in their eyebrows and whatever, and cover them up and do stretch and stipple and tissue paper and latex and gelatin. So anyhow, after doing the makeup, I'd pull it off, and I literally ripped off Heidi's eyebrow. And yeah, it's like a little war wound, and it's still kind of missing there. But yes, and she loves to tell that story too. She's like, before Howie, became a professional, he tore my eyebrow off. So, but yeah, my sisters were all victims of my experimenting. So, but they all survived in one way or another, and they're all good. And, but they were perfect. They were perfect models to do makeups on.
I believe this photo of some of the masks. I believe this is a photo of some of the masks you made during this time. Were the police ever called over your makeup?
Well, not when I was a kid. Oh well, yes, actually, yes. So yes, that is a photo in my bedroom, and my room was wall to wall masks. So my parents they had built a separate room. They added onto the house, and that became my bedroom because it was far away from everybody, because I was up all night sculpting and painting and making molds and doing whatever. They even took the carpeting out because they're like, this is crazy. He's destroying the room. That way he can just hose out the room. And I'm like, great, that's all I need. I don't need carpeting. So the room had shit. My dad put up shelves all around the room, and there was masks all around. I had so many masks, and I have no idea whatever happened to them or where they are. I wish I could remember, and wish I was smart enough then to just put them in archival paper and put them in boxes so I could have them now. I don't have anything from when I was a kid, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I did a makeup again on my sister Heidi. It was like a beaten up makeup, and I sculpted these little appliances, ran them in just slip latex, and like swollen eye, and did a bloody lip and busted nose and all that. And I went to the 1 hour photo place and dropped the photos off because it wasn't digital back then. It was 35 millimeter. And then my parents got a call from the police, or they showed up or something with the photos saying that they felt there's evidence of a child being abused. And then my parents explained that I want to be a makeup artist and that's makeup. And so, yeah, it was a little bit of a thing, but luckily, I showed, once they saw me and saw I did makeup, they're like, oh, it's a makeup. And that my sister was perfectly fine. But, we've had stuff at KNB where it was like early in the morning. This happened a long, long time ago, probably 20 years ago. And we had made a body for somebody, and we had it wrapped up in plastic, and it was like probably 5 a.m, and they came to pick it up, and I carried it out and put it in their trunk, and they closed it, but like the leg was dangling out of the plastic bag. Somebody called, the police showed up with their guns drawn, and they're like, do you have there was a report of a dead body in here. I said, yeah, there's a ton of dead bodies here. You want to come in? And they came and they went, oh, you're a makeup effects. And I'm like, yeah. I said, that wasn't real. I said, and they're like, okay, we got a report that there was a dead female body being thrown into a trunk of a car. I went, okay. Well, I said, at least somebody's paying attention, so that's good.
So this is a photo of your senior year in high school.
Oh, you really do your research. What the hell? What you go to school, right?
Yes, I do go to school. You're already looking like a 35-year-old accountant.
Yes.
And monster making aside, what were you like in high school? And aside from the beard, how much of your high school experience do you think informs who you are today?
Very good question again. So yes, I'm very mature for my age. I stopped growing when I was 13. At 13 years old, I was 6'1". And I'm gonna say at about 16 or 17, I was able to grow a full beard, like you saw there. And that was I think that was my senior picture. But high school was super, super influential. I had a great teacher. His name's Robert Corelli, and he was the drama teacher at Chatsworth High. And he would inspire us and force us to really go outside the box and push us. And once he found out that I did makeup, I elevated from like drama 1 on my first day of school to play production on my second day of school. And usually it takes 2-3 years to get into play production, because that's really for like the seniors. But he's like, he saw my book, I brought my portfolio, and he's like, I got to use you. You're in play production starting tomorrow. And he just was great. And he picked shows that had potential makeups, and if we could rearrange them so that there was more stuff. And he gave me a great opportunity to learn. But as a kid, I was very much an introvert. I was very quiet. I was very shy. I had a lot of like nervousness about me. I tell people that now, and they're like, are you kidding? Because I talk in front of everybody. I'm very vocal about things, and maybe that all comes with age after a while. But yeah, and confidence, and I had a lack of confidence. I didn't have a girlfriend, and but I didn't have time because I wanted to do monsters, And then I did meet a girl in high school, and that was my very first girlfriend, Heather McPherson, and we dated for a while. And but still, my true love was monsters, and it always has been. But high school was great. I loved high school. It was a different world back then. It was simpler. I would, Halloween, of course, was always great at school, because I'd go the full Monty and just dress up, and all my friends, I'm like, hey, we'll do all this stuff. We did a bunch of stuff. I did a gag one night with my friends, which was interesting because I didn't hear anything else about it, but I made a bunch of fake blood, and I splattered it all over in a door, and it made it look like a murder scene. And I even got down on my stomach, and I dragged myself away, leaving a blood stain, thinking like the next day there'll be somebody say. Nobody said a word. And I'm like, was there not just like 3 gallons of blood splattered all over the walls and door, and like handprints, and looked like somebody crawled away? Nobody said a word. And I'm like, this is whacked. I mean, maybe they're covering up. They didn't want to go, there was a murder last night, but we're not quite sure where the body is. So yeah, that was those are the crazy things, because monsters are super cool. And that's also where I started to like think about gore. Not that I'm a gore fan. I do it. I have done a tremendous amount, but it's not the thing I focus on. And I try to stay away from that, just because I don't like sticky blood and all that now. But I would get reactions, like you get more of a reaction from like a cut off finger, or, a gag, like spurting blood, all over the dinner table or something like that. Then you do like, hey, I'm a monster. I'm the wolf man. It's like, okay, sounds great. Nice wolf man. But if I come in and like, I got a razor blade and I cut out a wedge and put it on my finger and covered it in blood, and I'm like, Mom, I cut my finger, Although she never believed it, but other people in the neighborhood did. If I just put it on like the tip of my finger, I'm like, oh, help me. And, I'd be holding my hand, blood all over the place, and a razor blade sticking up. that got some reaction, which was really nice.
They were just all like, "Oh, that's Howard."
Yeah, my parents were like, Howard, just make sure you clean up, please.
So you graduated high school and began working at 18 years old for Stan Winston Studios on movies like Aliens, Predator, and later Pumpkinhead. You worked with Stan for a while. You then worked with John Carl Buechler. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right.
Buechler, yes.
Buechler.
Yeah.
On movies like Trancers, Ghoulies, and Troll, before landing your first location gig at Page Avjet Mine in Wampum, Pennsylvania, to film George Romero's Day of the Dead. In a matter of weeks, you met three guys who will prove very important in your life: Robert Kurtzman, GREG Nicotero, and Tom Savini. Will you tell us about the first time you met these guys?
Sure. Well, I was working at John Buechler's, and I got another guy I was working with who had already left to go work on Day of the Dead. His name was John Vulich, who ended up starting Optic Nerve. And Johnny called and said, "Hey, we need two makeup artists. I was thinking you and Everett Burrell. You guys up for it?" I'm like, and we're both, Everett's like 17, I'm 18. And we're like, yeah, 100%. Yes, we'd love to do that. Neither of us had ever been on location. And so we got to go to Pittsburgh. And, but I had to replace myself at John. So the day before, there was a guy named Robert Kurtzman who had just graduated Joe Belasco's makeup school. He had come in and his card was there. And I'm like, yeah, anybody could work at Buechler. So I'm going to call this guy and see if he wants to take my job. So I called Kurtzman and I said, "Hey, I'm leaving, but I need to find a replacement. Are you up for taking my job working at John Buechler?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, that sounds great. Thank you. Hey, you want to meet for dinner?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So Bob and I went out for dinner, not knowing each other. We had the best time ever, became friends like in those 6 hours. Next day, Everett Burrell and I flew to Pittsburgh. We get off the plane. We go to Wampum Mall, and all of a sudden, Tom Savini runs past us, and they go. Somebody says, "Oh, Howard, this is Howard and Everett." He's like, "Yeah, I'll be right back. I'll be right back. I'm doing a prank," and he ran past us. And then this other guy walks past, and he's like, "Tom Savini," and just shakes his head, and he's like, "Hey, I'm GREG Nicotero." I'm like, "Oh, I'm Howard Berger," and then he's like, "Hey, GREG Nicotero." It's like, "Hey, I'm Everett Burrell." That was our very first meeting. Well, Tom was off to go do a prank on a guy named Charles, who was the production accountant, and it was like, putting black stuff on his phone, so when he picked it up and there'd be black rings around his face. Tom was a big trickster. Anyhow, that show was a really important show for us and for me. I mean, I got to meet GREG Nicotero. We became really, really tight. Of course, working for Tom Savini was a complete blast. Loved every second of it. Laughed my ass off the whole time. And getting to be with guys like Mike Tursick and Dave Kinlan and Johnny Vulich, and it was really a great experience. And so when the show ended, I said to GREG, I said, "You should move to LA." And he's like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm supposed to go back to med school. I promised my parents I'd only take a semester off." I'm like, "Dude, forget about med school. Move out to LA. We go get a house. It'll be you, me, and Kurtzman. It'll be awesome. It'll be the house of wayward makeup artists, and people can come and hang out and stay over if they don't have a place." So GREG moved out, and yeah, it was a blast. We worked for other people. We worked for Mark Shostrom and Kevin Yeager and Rick Baker and all these people. And at some point, we just decided, you know what? Let's start our own company. Let's start a company. We'll call it Kurtzman, Nicotero, and Berger EFX Group. And we just jumped into it. We took a chance. We're like, let's stop working for other people and let's see if we can start this own company. And everybody thought we were going to fail. They're like, "Oh, right, you guys, what do you know about running a shop?" Or, you guys are kind of, we'll see what happens, but you're probably all going to fail. But I was, saying, okay, well, we'll do the best we can. And, first job, we made no money. Second job, we made no money. Third job, we made no money. But then we started to build a reputation and doing cool stuff and for little money, and could do it, in a quick amount of time. And, started getting bigger and bigger films. And then we started to make some money, but it took a long time. It took about 5 years for us to make any real money at KNB. And that's normally true for all businesses. It takes a long time. So we just had to grin and bear it and, be careful what little money we had and how little we spent. And, but we survived it. And now we have KNB after 35 years.
Your meeting of GREG Nicotero and Tom Savini just sounds like the opening to a pilot on a sitcom.
Yeah, it's called That's Savini. Yes, that's Savini. So yes, that would be. I mean, Tom is full of antics. He still is. And I saw him. What was it, like last week or 2 weeks ago at Monster Palooza? And I hadn't seen him for a little bit. I hadn't seen him actually for a while. I hadn't seen him since the pandemic. But I love Savini. He's so funny, and he's such a good guy. He has such a good heart, and he's a giant monster kid. You know, he's still a kid. He's 75 years old, going on 12. You know, it's so refreshing to be with Tom. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
So you played the spin around cave zombie in Day of the Dead, which you mentioned earlier that you mainly played monsters and zombies. Do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies?
I like slow zombies. You know, I think that falls into it. That doesn't mean that I don't like fast zombies, because I actually really, and I know people are going to be mad at me for saying this, I really like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead version. You know, I think it's a really, really cool movie. I know certain people don't like it. They have a lot of issue with it, but I like George's. I like Zack's. I'm a fan of both, you know? Yeah, I mean, I'm good with what have you, you know? I mean, everybody can make a zombie movie however they want. I mean, George kind of set the rules, you know? But rules are meant to be broken, so you can kind of, like, you know, if you want to make a zombie movie and you have them kind of sachet, then you can do that. So it's kind of in between the walking and the running.
Were you working on Evil Dead 2 when you decided to create KNB Effects?
No, we were working. God, we were past that. I mean, on Evil Dead 2, Greg, Bob, and myself, we were working for Mark Shostrom, so he was the boss on the show. But Mark was generous enough to give us a lot of opportunity on that show. And, you know, like, I handled all the Evil Ash stuff. You know, Kurtzman did Evil Sheila, or not Evil Sheila, sorry, that was the other movie. That was Army of Darkness. Linda, Evil Linda. Mike Tursick did stuff for that. We all did things. Shannon Shea did Evil Ed. So Mark really gave us a lot of responsibility, and Mark was in charge of, he wanted to focus on Henrietta and the Pee-wee Head and all that stuff. And Aaron Sims was on the show too. A lot of good people. And so we just kind of all worked together. So because Greg, Bob, and I were primarily on set orchestrating things for Mark Shostrom, I think Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert and Bruce Campbell associated us more with that movie's effects than they did Mark, because Mark was involved trying to get other stuff done, but we were the face for Mark. So when Army of Darkness came up, we had already started K&B in 2000, and I'm sorry, in 1988. Sam and Rob and Bruce called us for Army of Darkness. Not that was K&B's first movie. K&B's first movie is a film called Night Crew, or Intruder, that Scott Spiegel wrote and directed. But we started K&B. Let's see, I was working at Kevin Yeager's, and I was on Nightmare Part 4 doing Robert Englund's makeup. And it was a great opportunity. Kevin gave me many, many great opportunities. And Bob and Greg were working for Mark Shostrom on, they're doing double duty on Deep Star 6 and Phantasm 2. And I think we met for dinner one night and said, guys, why don't we start our own business? Because we're supervising for people. We're always working our asses off. We don't have the credit. We don't get the money. Let's create our own future, you know? So we just started, after we finished those shows, we started our own company, and with, you know, very little money, a couple tables and an 800 square foot shop, and started making stuff. And we were lucky that we knew people like Sean Cunningham, who, you know, produced Deep Star 6, and Don Coscarelli, who did Phantasm. And, you know, we didn't go pursue anybody. They came to us because they saw, like, okay, well, Greg and Bob have been on set for this with Coscarelli, and Don's like, okay, I feel like I know those guys pretty well, and I'd like to use them on the next thing. Or Sean Cunningham worked with the guys on Deep Star 6, and he's got a movie, and he's like, I think I want to give Howard, Bob, and Greg an opportunity to step up, you know. And so it was things like that. And same with Sam. You know, Sam, we hadn't worked with Sam Raimi since Evil Dead 2. And then like I said, that was in 86, and then Army of Darkness was in 1990. So there was quite a bit of a span, and it was great. You know, we always love working with those guys. I mean, we feel really fortunate we got to work with, like you had mentioned in the beginning, you know, John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper, Stuart Gordon, Mick Garris, George Romero. I mean, you know, Darabont, all these people, you know, and more and more and more, and Quentin, of course, and Robert Rodriguez, and so forth and so on. And they've all been so great and generous. And for us, like, especially when you get to work with Tobe Hooper, you know, that was a thrill, because I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the best movies ever made. And not just because I'm a horror fanatic, but it's truly an artful movie. It's really brilliant. And Tobe, getting to know Tobe was so wonderful, and he was such a kind person. And I saw him, you know, a little bit, maybe a year before he passed away. I was at a barbecue restaurant, of course, perfect place to run into Tobe Hooper, at a barbecue restaurant. And I just heard, like, Howard. And I looked over, and it was Tobe. And I walked over. I was a friend with me. I'm like, hey, come here, let's meet Tobe Hooper. Sat down with Tobe and talked to him, and it was great, you know. And he's just was such a super nice guy, you know. And John Carpenter's great, and Wes Craven, and yeah, I mean, God, we lucked out, you know. And then when Mick Garris created Masters of Horror, I did the first 2 seasons, and it was so great getting to work with all these guys and people I had not known, like Larry Cohen, who was so fantastic and such a great guy. And I always liked his movies, but like meeting him, I'm like, this guy is really solid. What an awesome dude. But it was great, you know. That gave us a great opportunity to do things. And Mick is wonderful. He's a wonderful leader and writer, amazing writer and director. And yeah, it was super fun. We had a great time.
So, real quick, I'm gonna pause the interview real quick. We have a few more minutes till it's been an hour, but I have a little bit of a way to be finished.
That's
Is
okay.
it okay if we run a little longer?
Of course it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I'm gonna start back up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So KNB launched, and you become known as the Gore Guys as you tackle movies from iconic horror franchises like, as you mentioned, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. KNB has been behind all the modern monsters at some point. Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, and Leatherface. You've done everyone but Pinhead. How was Dances with Wolves a turning point for the company?
Well, even stepping back before Dances, we did a film called Gross Anatomy, which is not a horror movie, for Disney Studios, and it starred Matthew Modine and Daphne Zuniga, and it's about med students that are in gross anatomy, which is where you operate and do autopsies and so forth, and anatomy on cadavers. So we were hired, probably because we were so inexpensive, to build all these bodies that could disassemble and, and we had different versions of them. And we named him Harry, was the character's name. And so we had a hairy body, and it opened up and did all this stuff. And we built, Bob and I went to set, and we did all this stuff at Disney. It was really, really thrilling. So we get a phone call out of the blue from Kevin Costner, and he says, hey, I saw this stuff you did for Gross Anatomy, and I know I'm familiar with you guys, so I figure if you can do dead bodies, you can do dead buffalo. And we said, sure, we can do that. Meanwhile, we didn't have a clue how to do it. So Bob and I went to meet with Kevin Costner at his office, and we talked about what the movie was and what he was looking for. And we just like, oh, yeah, we can do that. And we left afterwards. We're like, we don't know how the hell to do any of this stuff. We're going to have to figure this stuff out, which is what you do anyhow. And at that time, it was a lot of money, which it's not a lot of money, but it was a lot of money for us. And so we did Dances, and after that, it kind of like kicked off a whole nother world. So we went from like just being like, oh, these are the Gore Guys, and then it opened it up to doing a bunch of other things, and it's one of the things that KNB is why it has its longevity, is we just didn't focus on one thing. And also I think it's because Greg and I have very different interests. We love monsters, we love movies, we love creating. Greg loves the horror genre. He loves, obviously, zombies and Walking Dead creatures, walkers, and he loves blood and guts. I love fantasy. I love character makeups. I like, subtle things. I like aging. I love stuff like that. So it's great, and that's how we're able to do everything, because we share a common interest, but we don't share an interest in the exact same things. So we're very diversified, which is wonderful. But yeah, I mean, it's Dances was a big kickoff, and then it just kept going and going and going. And listen, if you worked on a film that won Best Picture that year, all you have to do is say, oh, I worked on Dances, and then people were like, oh my goodness, we got to hire you right away. But we never lost our love for Freddy, for Jason, for Leatherface. Those movies, we don't discriminate. So even if today we got a call saying, hey, we're going to do a Chainsaw Massacre movie, we'd probably go, yeah, we were interested. Let's look at it and see what the script is like. We wouldn't go like, oh no, we don't do those sort of movies. Yeah, no, we'd love to do those films. So and you're right, the only iconic horror character that we haven't worked on is Pinhead. Even though KNB has never done anything with Chucky, I worked for Kevin Yeager on Chucky, so I'll say we did that. So I'm not that KNB did that, but that Chucky is in my blood. So,
so you mentioned the dead buffaloes. How many dead buffalo can fit in a convertible Eldorado?
Well, believe it or not, we learned only like 2. So one has to be, Greg had this convertible Eldorado. And it was, we put the top down, of course, hence the convertible. And we could only make 2 at a time in the shop. Our shop was very small. So we would take one and put it in the back seat. And then we'd put one in the passenger seat sitting up. And we would drive, Greg would drive all the way down Topanga Canyon and go to the storage unit. We'd load them in, and then we'd take out the next ones, put them in the car. So one day we were driving. Oh no, we went to go shoot photos to show Kevin Costner, and there was like a field right up the street from us. So we took the buffalo and we put it there and we dressed it and all that stuff. And the police showed up and they wanted to know why we had a dead buffalo and why we were on the side of the street shooting a dead buffalo. So then we explained, it's not a real dead buffalo, it's a fake one. We're doing this movie, this Western, and we just came over here because this looks like the prairie, it was like dirt and weeds and all this stuff. And anyhow, they let us go, and we had to put it back in the Eldorado. But yes, thank goodness we had Greg's convertible Eldorado. We would have never been able to get the buffalo back and forth to storage.
More police stories.
Yeah, the police love us. So yeah.
So you've said Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was one of the first movies your kids could really watch and enjoy. What do you think is a good age to introduce kids to horror movies?
That's a good question. Well, it depends on the horror movie. So I would say that the classics, I think early teens or right before, like I think like my children are all grown up now. They're all in their 20s, but I probably showed my kids films a little too early. My son Travis, I probably showed him, trying to think when I first showed him a horror film that was like a classic horror film, probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years old, maybe even a little younger. But like nowadays, the horror films, I would really wait. Some of them are really intense and are not appropriate for kids. Especially like things like Hostel or what have you. Any of Eli Roth stuff is hardcore. But it's, I think you can start with like, the classic Universal monster films are a great way to start, and then build up from there. I think Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist is amazing and scary and fun, those movies are not mean, and I don't like mean horror movies, and in the past, they've gotten less mean, but there was a period where things were just too mean, and I just lost interest in those sort of films. I don't like torture stuff or any of that. I don't think that's horror. But it's all about the story. It's what's on the page. I think that even though Hostel was a torture film, Eli really hit a nerve and came up with something really, really creative and inventive, the first Hostel. And even Cabin Fever, which is the first time we worked with him, he was, fresh out of film school or what have you. And we really believed in him, and I thought Cabin Fever was fantastic, and I think Eli killed it on that film, and then he did a really great job on Hostel, but they're hard movies. They're tough films to get through. Eli likes his horror very very hardcore. So but yeah, I think you just have to judge what you think is best for your kids. I mean, if you want them in your bed crying every night, then show them Texas Chainsaw when they're 5 years old. But if you don't, then don't show them that.
One of the things I want to explore with the show is if horror can be a good thing in a world where kids are dealing with bullies, active shooter drills, and COVID lockdowns. Do you think scary movies can provide a safe way for teenagers to cope with these real life horrors?
Absolutely. I mean, I think all genres do. I mean, movies are a form of escapism. They always have been. During World War II, movies were very, very popular because people wanted to escape the horrors of reality. And yeah, I mean, I think as long as you're being entertained, I don't subscribe to the the thought of like, oh well, these movies make people do bad things or they're influenced by this or that. That's nonsense. There's a great writer friend, his name's Dave Scow, and Dave once said, well, if horror movies make people do bad things, then we should be showing Disney movies in prison, so that when they get out, they'll be do good things. So, and it's a ridiculous conversation and a ridiculous statement somebody once said about that. Like, well, it's what the kids are watching. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with lack of parental guidance and just general common sense that's not taught to people, and how to treat people and so forth. But yeah, I mean, I've always watched horror movies. I mean, during the pandemic, when I was locked in my house for 5 months, my wife and I watched so many things. It was so great. I caught up on everything, and I watched a million movies that I love, that I grew up on. I made this big queue of films, from classic monsters to Godzilla to Midsummer, which I think is one of the most horrifying movies ever made.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm still gacked out. Somebody asked me that recently, like, oh, is there a movie that you really freaked you out? I'm like, oh yeah, Midsummer still weirds me out. I think about it, I get so creeped out. And Heredity too. I mean, but Midsummer, I've never seen anything like that. That just was horrifying beyond belief. So, which was great. I loved it because I feel like after you see a movie, if you think a lot about it and keep thinking about it, it means it was a really good film. It affected you. Then sometimes when you see a movie and you enjoyed it and you walk out and you're like, I don't remember much. It's like eating a piece of candy, like that 10 seconds that Tootsie rolls in your mouth or what have you. You enjoy it, and then you forget about it when it's gone. So, it's like a piece of candy, but there's movies that last in your brain forever and ever. And Midsummer is definitely one of those.
Who was the first person you called when you learned you were nominated for the Academy Award?
First person I called was my children. I called my kids and I let them know. And it was early in the morning. I woke up early in the morning and I turned on the TV and they announced the Oscars. But but on the TV then they didn't announce like any of the crafts. It was all like Best Picture and Director and all that. And so then the producer of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Mark Johnson, called me and he said, hey, Howard, congratulations. You've been nominated for an Academy Award. And I was like, oh my God. Actually, you know what? I have to strike that. The first person I called was not my kids. It was my best friend, Tammy Lane. Sorry. Tammy was on a show for me. She was shooting up in like Big Bear, this thing with David Arquette. And I was like, this was like 5:30 in the morning. And Tammy was shooting nights. And she was asleep. So, but I called her, I'm calling and calling. She finally picks, she's like, what? And I go, get out of bed. No, I just got here. I'm going to bed. I said, Tammy, you've been nominated for an Academy Award. And she just started screaming and yelling, so excited. And I was like, this is great. I'm like out of my mind. And she was so excited. And then she, of course, had to go to work. She was on location, so then she had to go to work, and she went into the makeup trailer, and the makeup team had decorated the whole thing, the whole place. And Debbie Zoller was the makeup department head on it, and she out of tinfoil made Oscars all over the place. So, but then the second people I called were my kids. That's what it was. But I had to call Tammy first. So yeah, because she was co-nominated with me. It was Tammy and myself being nominated for Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. And yeah, that was an amazing period in my life.
Do you have a name for your Oscar, or do you just call him Oscar?
I just call him Oscar. He's right back there. He's right there.
Oh, he is. I didn't even notice that. Oh, that's cool.
Right in my head. He's right underneath the giant Iron Giant. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So no, I don't have a name for him. It's just like, oh, the Oscar. So, but it was a great thing. It was super cool. But it's not why I was excited to do the movie. I did the movie because I was excited about the film, and that it was the first movie my kids could come visit and they could see what their dad does for a living. I mean, they knew what I did, but they couldn't see the movies I worked on. So it was a great family experience. And, then when you get nominated, it's gravy. You've had this great, amazing experience working on a film, and then you get nominated for BAFTA and for this and a Saturn and all that great stuff. And it's really, really awesome. And I'm very, very grateful for it. I always think about it, and I'm very thankful for it. So, but it's, but then the next day I had to go to work. So, it's not like after you win, it's like, yes, I won the Oscar, and then I had to go to set the next day, and they still, push you around and try to, treat you like crap. But that's okay. It puts you in your place. It's not like, yes, you're royalty, or you don't take it with you and you're like, well, let me tell you, and put it on your desk. So it doesn't work that way.
You, GREG NICOTERO, Rick Baker, Stan Winston, Tom Savini, Bob Bottin, Dick Smith. What is the common denominator between all of you that makes you so successful in this field?
We're all crazy monster fanatics, I think. I think we all love movies. I mean, all those people you mentioned have a love for film, have a love for makeup, a love for monsters, and enjoy entertaining people, and being creative. And I think that's the common denominator. It's like it's in our blood. And I think that's what people don't understand with monster kids and monster makers, is that we only think about this. Like, I mean, there's no options. There's not a plan B, like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll go work at a pizza place. It's not like that. It's literally like you're infected, like you've been infected with the makeup bug, and you just have to do it. That's the only cure, is to do it. And it's wonderful, and it's lovely, and it's fantastic, because I love doing it, and all of them do. They're all creative people. And Greg and I grew up worshiping all those guys, loving Stan, loving Rick, loving Dick Smith, and Rob Bottin, and Greg Canham, and I mean, it goes on and on and on. Stuart Freeborn, and a million people. And you hold them in such high regard, and they really are the masters, and they're the guys that figured it all out, and handed the baton to all us guys. And now time's getting to the point where we're ready to hand the baton off to the next generation, which is kind of cool, and trying to nurture people. And there's some really, really, really good new people out there. I mean, when I say new, they've been around for a little bit, but they're a lot younger than Greg and I. They're probably 20 years younger than we are. And they're definitely the future. People like Vincent Van Dyke and Arian, and Justin Raleigh, and these guys are great. Jason Collins, and there's a lot of really, really great guys, and people coming up the ranks. And it's nice to know that when we're done, because we're not going to do this forever. I don't see myself at like 65, 70 years old on set, waking up at 4:30 in the morning and going to apply a bunch of makeups. That's not my big dream. I feel like at that point I will have pretty much done everything I wanted to do. But it'll be great to see the next generation and what they bring to the table, because there's some really, really talented, super talented people out there, and it's really fun to watch.
Dick Smith was known to share his secrets and recipes for blood with others. You've said creators shared their ideas and support each other when you were coming up. That doesn't seem to be the case today. Can you see where competitiveness can hold the field back and even lead to losing some of the knowledge?
100%. I mean, I think it depends. That's something that we're trying to break in the new people coming up. Not any of the people that I had mentioned, like Vincent or Arian or anybody. But I think what has happened is that the schools where a lot of people go and learn, it's a competition. And I think shows like Face Off, which were very good shows for people to showcase on, was also a competition. And I feel that there's a generation that came out of that and is coming out of that they compete with each other. But you don't have to compete. You need to work together, because you have to work as a team, no matter what, even if you're on two different shows. You know, I might need something on a show, and I can call Justin Raleigh, who owns Fractured Effects, and go, hey, Justin, you know, I can't get a hold of this actor. I think you have his casts, his body cast and head cast. Can I rent them from you or borrow them? And he's like, 100%, you know, go ahead. If that helps you out. I'm like, thank you. And then somebody might call me and go, hey, Howard, like Aaron Kruger might call and say, Howard, we got to turn this thing around. Do you happen to have any stock appliances that like this? And I'm like, yeah, we can certainly do it. It's not anything specific. So absolutely. It helps out my friend Aaron Kruger, you know, who I've been friends with for 35 years. And so that's really great. You have to help each other. And I have seen, it's not as bad as it was, but there was a period just a little bit ago where these people were like at each other, like they're just talking bad about each other and you know, really being cutthroat. And I kept saying, guys, you're going to find yourselves in a pickle, because you're not working together. I said, you'll extinguish this industry if you guys, you have to work as one. You know, everybody has to be friendly. And listen, when shops started in the 80s, there was competition, but now there's, amongst the main shops, we're all friends. You know, Fractured, Autonomous, Legacy, Spectral, you know, Vincent Van Dyke, we're all friends, and we all contribute to each other. We see each other socially, you know, at times. And so there's no animosity. There's no like, oh, I hope those guys fail, or I hope, you know, I hear like Legacy's got a show, and I'm like, that's great. I know they're going to do really super cool stuff, right? Here, Justin Raleigh's got a show, and I'm like, that's going to be awesome, because Justin Raleigh's a super talented guy. So you champion your friends and you champion the other shops, because it only makes everybody stronger and better. If you start to like be at each other, like, oh, I don't like that person, do you hear this and that, and all this tittle, you know, and so much of that is social media nonsense. And you're going to start chiseling away the infrastructure of what our industry is, and you're going to end up with nothing. And you're going to say like, well, geez, if I was friends with so-and-so, I could have borrowed this life cast, but now I can't because we hate each other. But now I'm just going to have to do this generically instead of, you know, it's just, it's the wrong way to think about it. You know, everybody works under the same umbrella. I say this all the time on shows, and it's true. We work under one big umbrella, so we work as a team, and it's so important. And without it, you're going to fail.
Is Dick Smith's recipe for blood still the best?
I think it is still the best. I still use it. Yeah, I mean, Dick gave me the formula when I was a kid, and though we've modified it here and there at KNB, it's still tried and true, and it's great. And like anything, you know, I mean, certain things would work for Dick Smith that didn't quite work 100% for us, so we would augment things and change. Like, oh, I'm going to add a little bit more of this, or I'm going to do a little bit less of this, until you find what works better for you and what your needs are. But the base of that blood that we've had at KNB for 35 years is Dick Smith's formula, and I stand by it 100%.
Who are the specific effects makeup wizards to keep an eye on in the future?
Well, like I said prior, I think, you know, Vincent Van Dyke, definitely. Arian is amazing. Justin Raleigh. Yeah, there's some really, really, really good people. Some people that really are excellent and that have shops, you know, that are really producing some beautiful work. I think Legacy will keep going. Those guys aren't young; they're my age, so they're old farts like me and Greg. But they always produce great work. But you know, I think Vincent Van Dyke is amazing. He really blows me away. He's amazing. And then on the East Coast, Mike Marino is a brilliant genius, and Mike Fontaine, geniuses. So that's always really refreshing. Every time they do something, I'm like, it's incredible. Like Mike, the two Mikes were responsible for the Penguin makeup on Colin Farrell in the new Batman movie, which I think is probably one of the best makeups ever done. And just super talented. In Europe, there's great people, you know, really amazing artists. Barry Gower, Göran Lundstrom, really quite amazing. You know, there's people all over the place, and you know, people just should aspire to do as great as work as they do. You know, that's how you're going to get ahead, is just keep doing great work. And I think it's important to be very critical of your own work, because some people will. I get a lot of resumes and a lot of portfolios, and I look at everything and I always write everybody back, but I'm honest. I never say like, this is terrible, but I'll write back and go, hey, you know what, if I may suggest, maybe next time think about doing this or this, and you know, don't include 400 photos of this one makeup. Let's just see one photo and maybe cut back on the gore stuff, and let's be careful the way you shoot stuff, and maybe try practicing a little bit more. Why don't you reapply this makeup to, you know, because sometimes you find that after you apply the same makeup a couple times, it gets better and better, of course. So, you know, we all try to help direct the next generation, and hopefully, you know, that'll work, you know, because if not, there won't. Once we all retire, then there won't be makeup effects anymore. You know, people always are like, oh, are you worried about digital? I'm like, no, I'm worried about people being able to take over and do a great job, you know, and do kind of the similar quality stuff that all of us have been doing for decades and decades, even before me. You know, I'm like, we have to do as good as like Rick Baker, or as good as Steve Johnson did, or as good as, you know, we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. But it's also been a struggle because productions get tighter and tighter, pre-production. So where, you know, maybe a while ago, like on Narnia, we had like 7-8 months of pre-production. If Narnia was done today, I bet you we would have like eight weeks. And you're like, well, we'll shoot it in 8 weeks. It's really obscene. So people just don't understand how long it takes.
GREG NICOTERO plays guitar and has a band called The Rocking Dead. He formed with some of the Walking Dead crew. Do you think more songs have been written about love, lust, or heartbreak?
That's a funny question. But I think more songs have been written about heartbreak. I think so. Why? What do you think?
Moving on. See, I am actually moving on because I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
I think probably all of them.
All the above. Okay.
Yeah, all of the above. You have a book called Masters of Makeup Effects coming out in September. What can you tell us about the book?
It's going to be great. So my friend Marshall Julius, who's a writer in the UK, he's been bugging me for 15 years to write a book with him, and I always blow him off because I'm too busy. But when the pandemic happened, he said, now you have no excuse because you're not doing anything for the next 5 to 6 months. So I said, well, I want to do, like I said earlier in the interview, I want to do a book that's similar to Making a Monster, but I want this book not to be about me, because I know about me, but I want it to be about all the people that inspire me and that are my friends that do this, be it makeup artists, be it directors, be it editors, be it whoever, actors. And so I started putting a list together with Marshall of who I'd like to talk to, and it was about 70 people. And we formulated a letter and reached out to everybody, and everybody said they would love to be a part of the book. And so through the course of the pandemic, we would do 1 to 2 interviews a week. And they were amazing. Like, they were about 2 to 3 hours. Talking to John Landis was about 4 to 5 hours, but that was amazing. John was so gracious and wonderful. And even after I was like, okay, we got to wrap it up. He's like, I got more to say, because John always has a lot to say, which is magnificent. And he's the greatest storyteller. And of course, there's a lot of people I didn't get a chance to do. I kind of limited myself to like this number based on a time frame. I'm like, I'm going to interview from this time to this time, and then we're going to start writing and gathering photos. So there's quite a lot of people that I missed that I would have loved to have in this first edition. Hopefully, everybody will order it and buy this book, and then I can do a second edition, which would be great, because I collected 4,000 unseen photos. I ended up using about 1,000 in the book, and it's going to be great. I think people are going to dig it. It's a great picture book. It's filled with stories from all these people, you know, from Rick Baker, and from Matt Winston, Stan's son, talking about Stan as a kid and all that, and Mark Coulier and Nick Dudman and Aaron Kruger, and I mean just all these people, and John Landis and James McAvoy and Ben Foster, and I wanted to talk about the relationship that actors have with their makeup artists, because that's very important. And then how makeup artists, the relationship, like there's a makeup artist named Jamie Kellman, and Jamie has a very strong partnership with Ben Foster. And there's a movie on HBO right now called The Survivor, and Ben stars in it, and Jamie did all the makeup work. And it's such a great example of a partnership. Like, it couldn't have been done without, like, if Jamie wasn't on it, it couldn't have been done. If Ben wasn't on it, it couldn't have been done. It's just a perfect storm. And so there's stories like that. There's directors, like I had said, like, John Landis was great. Fred Raskin, who's James Gunn's editor and Quentin Tarantino's editor, talked to him, so it's really, really wonderful. And I was really lucky that it was a great opportunity that everybody was stuck at home for 5 months. And it was a fun adventure. I'd never written a book. It took 2 years, and it comes out the middle of September all over the world. It's being translated in multiple languages, which is really, really nice. It's through Welbeck Publishing, which is in London. And you can pre-order it on Amazon. It's doing amazingly well, I think, and hear and see. And it's just going to be fun. It's a fun book. You read stories, crazy stories that you're like, what the hell is this? And it's almost like you're sitting at the dinner table with all these people, and they're telling you these crazy war stories, how they did things. And it's not a how-to book. It's not anything like, it's not like, well, then I just took the glue and I took my brush. It's none of that stuff. It's all like this crazy, insane stuff. That's really, really, really funny. I learned so much about my friends. Well, I interviewed people I've known for 40 years, and I learned new things about them. So it was a great learning curve for me as well. And I really enjoyed it. And Marshall, I couldn't have asked for a better partner on this show, or on this book, on this project, because Marshall is a monster kid as well, and a complete geek and a nerd. And it was perfect, having his perspective on what works and doesn't work. And because I would have just included everything, but he's like, no, we got to pick and choose some of the stuff. So, but it's great. It'll be out in September. Amazon's a great place to pick it up, or any other online book service. But I think everybody will dig it.
It'll probably become one of my birthday presents, because my birthday is in September.
Perfect. Well, there you go. Now I know.
So you're a big fan of Star Wars, and recently bought yourself a Darth Vader and Stormtrooper mask for your birthday. Your emails are sent from the Death Star. I don't know how you do that. May I have your support in my ongoing campaign to have Disney create a horror movie set in the Star Wars universe?
Wow, that would be cool. Was there talk of that? For some reason, I feel like there was
there wasn't. I don't think so. I haven't seen any.
No, I think you're right. I think in order to keep that franchise going, I know they keep going back, like, oh, and this is the origin. But now I would love to start seeing movies that take it, like Rogue One was, though in the universe, was about characters we only heard one line at. A lot of people died to get these plans to us in the the first Star Wars film released. But I think it would be cool. That sounds like a cool thing, and you can certainly do a million things. But sure, I'll sign the petition. There you
go. When you're not busy cultivating a spectacular beard, you can sometimes be found at Augustine Wine Bar, drinking a glass of 1988 Opus 1, or having the perfect martini at Pet et Trois. I hope I'm not butchering that. You're also known to be a true cigar aficionado.
Yes. Oh, see, look at that. Yes. Well, I love my cigars. I love my fine wine. I love my martinis. This is all true. Some people will spend their money on cars and houses and things like that. I like to spend my money on really great food, great wine, cigars, all that stuff. It's yes, I like to pamper myself in those things. But everybody should. You should at some point. You work so hard. Sometimes it's nice to just relax and enjoy cigar and a martini, which I'll be doing this weekend, or a trip to Augustine or Maribel, which is in the San Fernando Valley, which if you live there, I highly recommend going and getting a glass of beautiful vintage wine. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than that. So I love it.
So what temperature do you store your cigars, and what's the best cigar you've had with the easiest straw?
You're hilarious. Well, I believe it or not, I've been going to this place on my way home called just Cigar Warehouse, which is in Sherman Oaks by my house, and they have a cigar they make. It's not a brand name, but I really like it. It has a great draw. I keep my cigars at about 64% humidity, and I've got a couple different humidors that have a couple different cigars. I also like the Padron cigars very much. But yeah, I don't like a heavy cigar. I like a light cigar. And I like a slightly larger one, so I can spend about 45 minutes to an hour smoking one in the backyard, kicked up in my little seat, or I meet up with one of my best friends, Johnny Villanueva, who's a great hairstylist and designer, and we'll hang out in his backyard and have a couple cigars and a couple martinis and try to figure out how one of us gets home.
So this last question is usually a Sophie's choice, two must die so that one may live, but we wanted to do something a little different for you. You, yeah. GREG Nicotero, and Robert Kurtzman were roommates in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. Based on cleanliness, courtesy, and conscientiousness, which two would have been voted off the island?
Oh, well, Kurtzman would have been voted off. Kurtzman was a pig. I can tell you that. I would be so grossed out because when we rented that house, okay, so yeah, it was 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. And for some reason, the whole house had carpeting in it. So Kurtzman, so GREG and I would try to get into the bathroom before Bob every morning so we could take showers. If Bob got in there, all bets were off, and I loved Bob Kurtzman like a brother, but Nicotero and I was like, we would plan it. Like if we heard Bob's alarm go off, one of us would get up and run in the bathroom, and then I'd knock on the wall, GREG's wall, so then he'd come in before Kurtzman, because Bob would make a mess out of everything. So it'd be between like stalactites in the sink from spitting toothpaste that just grew, and he never washed it down, which I still have issue with. And 2, the shower's a mess, or the floor's all wet, or the ultimate worst thing, somehow Bob overflowed the toilet onto the carpeting. That was always horrible. And for some reason, the toilets in Ohio work great, but the toilets in LA are terrible. Because Bob's from Ohio. And yeah, so it was tough living in a house only because of that reason, but we 3 of us got along so great, and we loved each other, and we're like brothers. And I mean, I'll be friends with GREG till the day I die, and same with Bob. I don't get to see Bob that often, but when I do, it's wonderful, and we talk once in a while. But yeah, he's great, he's wonderful. Nicotero, of course, I love to no end. And yeah, it's good. I mean, you have your spats and your disagreements, but as we're all getting older, they're a little bit different, and they're a little more civil. Although GREG might say the opposite of me, where he's like, just calm down, you're getting I'm like, what do you mean calm down? So GREG's always the voice of reason. He's like, take a breath, you're okay. So, but yeah, it's great. It's been a great being a partner with GREG. I've loved every second of it. And yeah, I mean, what better than to be in business with one of your best friends? And I'm very lucky with that. I get to work, I have 3 best friends. I've got GREG Nicotero, and I've got Tammy Lane, and my friend Johnny Villanueva. And I see them all the time, and I love working with them. I'm always trying to work with Tammy. I'm always trying to work with Johnny, and I get to see GREG all the time. And even if we're apart for long periods of time, we always make sure we communicate at least once a week. We're both busy if we're both shooting on a film at the same time, different films. But have always been pretty good about communicating, and that has helped the relationship through all these years.
Thank you for speaking with me. Is there anything you'd like to ask me before we're done?
Yeah. So okay. So do you consider yourself a monster kid?
Yes, I'd consider myself, yes.
Yeah. And do you like, I mean, what type of what horror do you like? Do you like classic horror? Do you like the new horror?
I like all of it. There's so much. There's too much to just specify on one. I love all of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, here I'm gonna, and this will be hard for you. Okay, give me 5 horror films that you really like. I'm not saying that are your favorites, but give me 5 horror films that you love.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'd say the first ever Godzilla. Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween 2 Rob Zombie edition because my dad worked on it and it was great. And Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Wow, those are very good and very diverse, I must say. The Halloween is the original John Carpenter Halloween.
Original John Carpenter Halloween, and then Halloween 2 Rob Zombie would be the other one.
Very good, very good.
I was 2 years old.
And out of all the iconic, horror icons, Freddy, Leatherface, Pinhead, Chucky, who am I forgetting? Leatherface, Pinhead, Chucky,
Michael Myers,
of course. Who would you say is one of your faves?
Jason Voorhees.
Jason
Voorhees.
Why do you like Jason so much?
The Friday the 13th franchise really got me into the horror thing. Like, I've always been a horror fan, but Friday the 13th got me into it. Kane Hodder specifically.
Kane Hodder, yeah. Is there? I was going to say, is there a specific Friday the 13th movie that you like?
7.
You like 7?
Yeah, I like 7 a lot.
Really?
It's really cool looking.
Okay. I really like part 2.
No, that's an amazing one too.
Part 2 is really great, and Carl Fullerton was the makeup effects guy on it, and he's in the book as well. But that I love that Jason, even though it's not on Kane, but it's a really, really interesting. Like, I like the Mountain Man version of it. I really like it a lot. And regarding like the Dead movies, like you have Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Is there a favorite in that?
Night of the Living Dead is like just the first, and it's obviously, and it was an instant classic. But I like Day of the Dead. I like Day of the Dead a lot. It's not too scary for me because I can't handle zombies all that well. I'm not great with them. But yeah, Day of the Dead was the best in my opinion. Dawn of the Dead is a very, very close second. And then Night of the Living Dead, though I loved it a lot, I think would go into the third.
All right, here's my last question for you, and then I'm going to let you go. If you had a time machine and you can go back in time to any movie set and visit for a day, what movie set would you want to go back in time and visit?
Probably. Is it okay if I have 2 answers?
Yes, you can say, yeah, you can go, okay, half day at this set and half day at that set.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be one, because like I want to know how they did that. And then probably the best, I want to go back to, I was actually on the set of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I was 2 years old, but I don't remember anything about it. I want to go back. I want to go back there. I want to see what I missed out because of my memory.
Very good. Okay. Well, there you go. Good answers. Good answers.
Thank you.
Yes.
So how can people find you?
Well, you can find me I'm on Instagram. So I'm at Hoops 511. So HOOPS 511. And that's the best way to get a hold of me. Really, I'm on Facebook infrequently. Howard Hoops Berger, I think it is. That's how infrequent I am on it. But Instagram is the big thing for me. And there's also an Instagram KNB page, which is I'm so bad at all this stuff, guys. Sorry. I think it's the official KNB Effects group. So there you go. But yeah, Hoops 511 is the best way to check things out, hop on. Regarding the book, there's a lot of promotion. We're doing some cool giveaways. We got a giveaway happening right now, and we'll have giveaways happening through the course. A lot of cool swag and all that stuff. But yeah, that's it. And then I'm just keep going to the movies now that things have relaxed a little bit in the world of COVID. make sure everybody goes to the movies. It's super, super important to not just sit at home and stream. It's really, really important to go sit in a movie theater, of course, take precautions, but and go and see films as they're meant to be. It's a different world. Watching Top Gun on your TV is very different than watching Top Gun in IMAX, you know? And also there's a lot of theaters that have revivals of things, which is great. You know, I just went to see, they just ran Star Wars in 70 millimeter, a print that was struck in 1977. So it's the original print that was at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures in LA. So I went to see that. It was unbelievable. It brought back every memory I had as a kid.
That's so cool.
So yeah, it's amazing. So, you know, great venues, you know, take a look and look for films that you will never get to see projected again. And if you get the opportunity to see them for that one night, it makes a difference. Take the effort to go, because you'll see films like you've never seen before. Like I saw The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, when it came out as a kid. Then after that, I just saw it on video. And then a number of years ago, they had a screening of a 70 millimeter print at the New Art, and I went to it, and I caught tons of stuff I never saw that were on the peripheral, because it's always cropped out on television. And I'm like, oh my God, I never saw, you know, child standing there, or I never saw, you know, this, or I didn't ever catch that creature's dangling. Saw it as a whole different movie, you know, in 70 millimeter. And it's just because you go and you want, and also going to the movies, it's a communal experience. You're supposed to be sitting in a theater with other people that are reacting. And, you know, if you're in your house or in your bedroom watching a movie, yeah, we watch the movie, but you don't get what the filmmaker intended, which is this excitement and how, you know, amazing it is. And so make sure you go to the movies. This is going to be a great, great summer. It's already starting off great. And, you know, just just be safe, but go out and have fun and enjoy movies.
Also, really quickly, you asked the question of like my top 5. Can I add a 6th one? Because I can't believe I forgot about
this time. Add a 6th one.
Tintorera tiger shark, also known as blue shark tiger shark, or dry cleaner tiger shark. Don't ask.
Yeah, I'm not
translations.
Yes,
But,
I'm gonna pass on that one.
But that's a great movie. It's a great.
I'll take your word for it.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell Greg and Tom that I want an interview.
Yeah, I'll tell them. No, absolutely, I will.
If it comes up.
It will. I'll be like, hey Tom, how you doing? By the way, so we'll handle it for you.